I just finished this piece using a nearly $600 set of colored pencils. I'm stoked with how it turned out, but to be honest, most of us can't afford using colored pencils like this. In this video, I'm gonna draw another rose, this time using a $28 set of colored pencils that you can snag on Amazon. In an effort to perform a clean, unbiased experiment, I am going to use the exact same paper that I used for my other drawing for this rose, Arch's hot pressed watercolor paper. I am using a large sheet and ripping it down into smaller pieces because that's what I have available, but this is a fine art paper that comes at a price that most of us can afford. Because this acid-free paper is a watercolor paper, it's great for a variety of blending techniques and for using mixed media approach. But this paper is slightly textured, so if that isn't your jam, I've got you covered. I'll also be doing a few demos with these pencils in my sketchbook, which has a smoother surface. For the pink part of this rose, I used the manganese violet to lightly map out the shadows, and as I moved towards the yellow center, I transitioned to using the dark Naples ochre. I used these two colors exclusively until I had roughly mapped out each petal, and then I started to lightly layer and apply other colors. In my opinion, yellow and white subjects are some of the most difficult to render because the shadows are lighter than they are in other subjects and they require more precision and delicacy. So I was really putting these pencils to the test with this subject. I used a variety of ochres, oranges, and light violets as I built up the color in these shadows with many light layers. Many budget pencils like Crayola are marketed more towards children and crafters that don't really need layering capabilities, and it's no surprise that lots of budget pencils don't layer very well. If you're working on a more fine art project and not a crafting project, layering is key and you need your pencils to be able to do this. I was excited to see that these Woomer pencils did a beautiful job building up many layers smoothly. To be honest, I heard about these pencils for the first time a few months ago when Woomer reached out to me about their pencils and asked to sponsor a video. When I looked at their product on Amazon, I was actually super skeptical, and I didn't expect amazing results because I had never used a set of colored pencils that was this inexpensive that performed well. The only thing that I had to compare it to at this price point were those crafty colored pencils that I talked about, kind of like Crayola pencils. In fact, I told Woomer that I would try out their product, but that I would only commit to making a video if the product was high quality and was something that I would recommend to you all. I am never going to pretend that an art supply is something that it isn't on this channel, even if a company offers to pay me. So before diving into this project, I tested the Woomer pencils extensively in my sketchbook, side by side other leading brands, and I want to show you the results and why I was so excited to make this video. On the first layer of this drawing, I'm doing what I call optical blending, or applying light transparent layers of color over one another and allowing the viewer's eyes to mix the pigments together to create the impression of a new color. Here are some optical blending samples using the ChromaFlow colored pencils, the Polychromos colored pencils, the Holbein colored pencils, which I used on the previous rose. This one is the Woomer set, lightfast pencils by Derwent, and Colorsoft pencils by Derwent. What differences can you spot between these different colored pencils? Honestly, I couldn't tell any major differences between the Woomer pencils and the other high quality brands like Polychromos, Lightfast, and Holbein. This first layer felt really similar to using Polychromos pencils. The Woomer pencils held a sharp point and were able to lay down light layers. I did notice that there were a couple colors that felt a little scratchier than others, and by this I mean that some pigments didn't lay down as smoothly and caught a little bit more on the texture of the paper, which led to a little less even coverage. But this isn't that uncommon in the most expensive brands either. Some pigments just have different textures and have slightly different personalities on the paper. So I wasn't really bothered by this at all, and I just made a mental note of which colors were a little scratchier and I used them more carefully. This first layer is done, and I really wanted to show you everything that I could with these pencils. So I'm going to use two different blending techniques. In the background, I'm going to use the Holbein MELTZ, and in the foreground, I'm going to use an odorless mineral spirits. When I blended with MELTZ in my test, the only pencils that even activated were the oil-based colored pencils, which included the Polychromos pencils, the Holbein pencils, and the Woomer pencils. And look at this. The Woomer pencils actually blend better with Holbein's MELTZ than
than the Holbein pencils do. I use this solvent in the background because it leads to a more painterly effect, and I wanted everything besides the flower to feel more out of focus. If you are new to MELTZ, I have a few videos in the video description that you can check out to learn more about this incredibly unique water-based solvent. Then for the flower, I used the EcoHouse Neutral Thin Odorless Mineral Spirits, and it worked beautifully, just as it works with all the other higher end pencils that you're familiar with. If you want to learn more about blending with OMS, there are resources linked below.
What do you think of these pencils so far, and how do you think they're going to perform as I progress towards the end of this drawing?
As I mentioned earlier, white and yellow subjects can be pretty tricky with colored pencils and become increasingly more tricky if you don't have access to a variety of light value colors that you can use in the shadows. In this 72 set of pencils, I had a few pencils I could work with to create the shadows, but there were a few lighter value colors that I wish I had access to as I worked on this rose. I felt that I spent a little longer than usual blending the white and yellow petals, but I was able to eventually achieve a result that I was really pleased with. If you're drawing a light subject like a light rose or a portrait with lighter skin tone, it's 100% possible to do so with these pencils. But if you are a beginner or want to make this process a little bit quicker and easier, I would recommend buying a few light colors open stock at an art supply store that complement the subject that you're drawing, and you could do this for less than $10. I had more than enough pinks and greens to easily work on the rest of the composition, and these areas were just about as fast as my pieces where I worked with other pencils. In fact, I had more pink options than I do in most of my other colored pencil sets. When I have drawn pink flowers with polychromos, Derwent Lightfast, or luminance pencils, there often aren't as many pink options, so I usually tweak my colors a bit so I can get close to my reference, but it's often difficult to match true pinks in my drawing. I think that the lack of pink options in these higher end sets has to do with it being difficult to create light fast pink pencils, and I've gotten used to working with the pencils that are available in these sets. With a $28 set of pencils, I honestly didn't have any light fast expectations, and I still enjoy tons of fun art supplies that aren't light fast. For me, light fastness really is only important for original artwork that I want to sell and that I can guarantee will keep its colors for decades. But listen to this. These pencils are all light fast. When I heard this, I thought that this was too good to be true, so I requested the lightfast testing documentation so I could have a look. And listen, these lightfast ratings seem pretty legit. In fact, according to the information I have on lightfastness for Woomer pencils, which are about 39 cents per pencil, and Holbein pencils, which are over 10 times more at $4 per pencil open stock, Woomer pencils have a higher percentage of pencils with higher lightfast ratings. Mind blown. And the blending capabilities of these pencils doesn't suck either. Look at the soft, smooth, even transitions that I'm able to get in that fuzzy, out of focus background, and compare that to the crisp, clean lines that I'm able to achieve with the flower in the foreground. I had no complaints when it came to blending with these colored pencils. Occasionally, after I sharpened a pencil, it had some dust, which all pencils do, but I noticed that the little dust particles from sharpening these pencils got stuck in my drawing a lot more than other pencils. Now, I don't know what that was all about, and it was easy enough to remove them, but sometimes I kind of had to brush the piece or pull them with a kneaded eraser, and they eventually all came off. But if you use these pencils, I would be really cautious about regularly dusting your piece so that you don't work any of these little fragments into the paper, because they do tend to be a little bit sticky. That being said, everything else with these pencils worked really smooth. The white in this set is superb and was great for blending. And I tested on a separate sheet of paper, and these pencils work great with a colorless blender as well. So here's my verdict on these pencils. These are a fantastic option for artists that are new to colored pencils. In the past, I have recommended ChromaFlow and Prismacolor pencils as budget-conscious options for beginners, but Woomer pencils are definitely a better option when it comes to light fastness and quality. Prismacolors have a reputation for breaking in the sharpener, and I experience very little, if any, breakage when sharpening these pencils. The only drawback for beginners is that these pencils can't be purchased individually at this point, so if you run out of a color, you will have to buy a whole other set. What about for the artists that have been working with colored pencil for years and already have a large set of higher end light fast colored pencils that you love? Well, I would recommend continuing to use the pencils that you love for your time-consuming final pieces, but consider this low-cost set for travel and for quick sketches. If you end up with something that you love, you won't have any concerns about the light fastness, but with pencils that only cost 39 cents each, you'll be more apt to take risks, play around in your sketchbook, and bring your pencils with you on vacations. Snag a set of these pencils or learn more with the link below. Now it's time for the final reveal. Do you think that these pencils held up to the $568 set? Let me know which of these drawings you prefer and why down in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about drawing flowers, be sure to check out my extensive playlist where I discuss everything from blurry backgrounds to selecting the right colors for yellow and white flowers. See you there.